3, 2, 1, go.
Matt Damon.
When you were working on Bourne, what was Matt like working with?
I got a phone call from the producer saying, Nick, what did you do? And I said, what do you mean? He was throwing the camera from one end to the next. It's too crazy. This is not the fight I shot. It's another, I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but I'm getting old and it doesn't matter too much anymore. So
Nick Powell's really good at that. He did Braveheart and Gladiator and these movies that had really compelling battle sequences and fight sequences. Me and Nick probably worked with about 7 stunt guys for a month on one fight in particular.
Working yourself up for that? Yeah.
So I wanted to have that background where I could mix and match anything, which turned out to be very, very helpful when I did Bourne, the first Bourne.
Yeah.
Because, obviously I used a lot of different styles in Bourne to try to sort of to change things up for Matt Damon.
Let me ask you this. So when you were working on Bourne, how closely did you work with Matt Damon? And did you do like pre-work with him, or how did that work?
No, what happened was the director and Matt had decided that they wanted to do a Filipino martial art. They wanted to do a Cali Eskrima style fight because at that point, no one had ever done it on screen properly.
Yeah.
Outside of a straight martial arts movie or something.
I love the Bournes, by the way, man. I really do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it was basically, I went in 6 weeks or so before we start shooting, and Matt had already done 3 months of Cali Eskrima, and he'd basically done the Filipino style, a lot of training. And when I met the director, he says, I want to do the Filipino style. And I said, yeah, but it's going to look too repetitive, too similar. I mean, if you have, there's only so many times you want to do the same moves over and over again before it looks like my description to him was, and I shouldn't say, I won't say it because it's politically incorrect now, but exactly. But basically I said, I think it'll look boring. And so I said, let me have a play with it. And I will come up with a style, mixing and matching, and sort of have that Eskrima feeling, and give you that kind of a feeling, but something that hasn't been. So I mixed some Krav Maga, some Thai style, some basic kick, and the style that Matt had been spent 3 months training for. And so I kind of came up with this version. Basically, I choreographed the fight, and trained Matt, directed the fight, edited the fight, the whole sort of thing there. So
you were in the editing room as well for Bourne, like putting the fights together?
Well, what happened was, and again, it's another, I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but I'm getting old and it doesn't matter too much anymore. So I got a phone call a few months after. I'd literally choreographed the fight, trained Matt, directed the fight, shot the fight, like from start to finish. Doug Lyman, the director, was sort of in another room and he watched a few playbacks and stuff, but basically said, Nick, get on with it. Yeah. So I did the whole thing. They edited the fight, and then I got a phone call from a producer on the movie basically saying, Nick, what did you do? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, everything's so tight. I said, no, I got all the shots that I needed. He said, well, I've seen an edit and the editor's saying there's no other footage. Get on a plane. So I was in Vancouver at the time. I flew down. I think we were editing at Sony. I flew down, went into the edit suite, saw the fight, and I went, this is not the fight I shot. I mean, yes, it is shots that I shot, but it's not the way I envisaged the fight to be done. So with the editor, he says there's no other footage. So the producer at the time, Frank Marshall, basically got me another editor and said, go into another edit suite over there and have a look at everything. Have a look at all your footage. So we went into another room, and all the shots that I wanted to use, well, not all, but I mean, 50-60% of the shots were there, but a number of shots were actually in the garbage, in the trash can, in the edit. Oh, wow. And so we exed the fight, And that was pretty much the fight that you see in the movie.
So when you first seen the footage that they used, was it just that they used everything like super close up, like the super close up stuff, and you couldn't see anything, or what was the reasoning for?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, it was so tight and it was so sort of impressionistic, which is they kind of went a little bit more that way after the first one.
Okay.
But in the first one that I did, oh, the lights have come back on.
So we got power, we got light.
Exactly. So in the first movie, I kind of everything was shot. I know it seems weird, but everything was actually shot on a Steadicam or a sort of a hand. There was some wides that I just with a little movement on a steady bag on the ground and things for different angles. And everybody thinks it was handheld because the Steadicam operator at the time, there was a French guy, Valentin, and he's the best Steadicam operator I've ever seen. And literally, he was throwing the camera from one end to the next, and just I'd say start here. By the time he's throwing the second punch, I'd like it to be on his other shoulder. And he was throwing that camera around like I've never seen anyone do that with a Steadicam. And so the whole fight in the apartment was shot on Steadicam. Which looks like it's handheld, but he was so fast that he could do it, use the Steadicam like handheld, and did an amazing job. And when I saw
when they're in the bathroom and all that stuff, when they're beating each other up real bad, and then they end up in the bathroom. Okay, gotcha.
In the apartment, he swung in through the window, smashed through the window. They went down the apartment, shot up the roof, and they had a fight on the apartment glass, down the corridor, and then the pen in the hand, everything.
Yeah.
So that fight, as I said, we shot it over 3.5 days. The whole fight was a 3.5 day shoot, which I did the whole shoot. And basically, again, when I saw the first edit, the producers were sort of, it's too crazy. It's too tight, everything. So I went and recut it. But basically, the fight that you see, I was trying to make it feel frenetic without it sort of being crazy and sort of, so close that, which it kind of, I mean, I'm going back to, I think, number 2 or 3, where they started to get really into that sort of crazy handheld thing, which Taken sort of copied. And then I never understood it, because if you switch off the sound on sort of Taken 2 or 3 or whatever it was, you can't see, there's like 50 cuts in 2 seconds, and it's, you can't tell what's going on. And the sound is kind of what makes the fight, which I never really liked. And then when you see John Wick, they kind of really let it breathe. So I was kind of trying for something which the John Wick to me can sometimes be a little slow in terms of, it feels like it's breathing a little. If you switch off the sound on a John Wick fight and you watch it, it can feel a little bit slow. It's really well done. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think they've done some amazing work. And then if you watch the Taken, you end up with something that's so frenetic. You could have just thrown 3 or 4 punches and put cameras in different places, and you sort of use the sound to make it feel exciting. And I was trying to get something in between those two, which obviously at that time John Wick hadn't been done, and neither had Taken. We were sort of trying to, as I was told at the beginning, to try to reinvent the genre a little bit.
So let me ask you, what movies did you grow up on then? Because if you were trying to shoot that style, because I know me personally, like I was a big fan of Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yep.
I like the big wide, because I think there's variations of it. Like you can do the wide and then you cut in for the closest to really get that when you're doing some punches and things like that. Was that something you were trying to do, like add a little bit of the old school with new school, or what?
I was trying to make it feel kinetic. I mean, that it was there was movement in every shot. So I wasn't really, at that point, I was trying to keep everything moving. So as well, the punches were happening, the camera was constantly moving the whole time.
So you almost did a pre-dance with
it. Breathe a little bit, and you could sort of pull back and wait for it. But it was, I grew up, I mean, I was a big fan of the Jackie Chan stuff and the Chinese movies at the time, obviously some Japanese stuff. And from the fight point of view, I think the Asians had it sort of over us in so many ways. At the same time, it kind of felt very repetitive. I mean, I loved wushu and everything else. And, but once you've seen a guy fighting wushu against a guy fighting wushu. It's the same thing. And so the idea that Doug Liman had, and I'm guessing Matt at the same time, to use a sort of Filipino martial art was really interesting to me. It was that they wanted to do something that hadn't been seen. It was just, again, if you do that kind of a style and it stays in that style for the whole fight, which it wasn't a massive fight. I think it was about 120 moves if you look at it from beginning to end. But if you stay in that style the whole time, it kind of feels a little bit, repetitive in terms of, so how do I make that style, which Matt's been spending time learning, feel fresh, new, utilize it so it looks cool in the movie, but at the same time have a realistic feel to it, because you can't do that when somebody's kicking you. And I don't want to use the same style all the way through. So let's use some Krav Maga, let's use some Thai boxing, let's use some whatever felt right. And again, I made that assumption that this guy was someone who'd been trained in all different things. Whatever situation you find yourself in, you can adapt to that situation because of all the training you've had, which is again an MMA sort of trait. We didn't use any jiu-jitsu in the fight. That's really the only thing from a sort of an MMA point of view that I would have now used a little bit more of at that stage, which we didn't do. But again, with everything in Bourne, like the climb down the outside of the building at the embassy, when he climbed down, I wanted it to feel real, not too exaggerated. So I basically got one of the best climbers in the world to come along, put a safety line on him, and I said, find a route down the outside of the building. Whatever route you find, we'll take, so that we know it actually can be achieved by one of the best guys. My brief and discussion with the director and producers was, this guy is, imagine he's the best fighter in the world. Imagine he's the best climber in the world. Imagine he's the best driver in the world. It's not that he's a superhero, but he's as good as the best human could possibly be at this stage. And obviously there's a little bit of leeway, dramatic, interpretation of what that is. But we weren't trying to make him something more than a real person could be. He can't leap 30 feet without breaking his legs. I mean, whatever he did could really be achieved. Yes, you might, break a leg, you might sprain something, you might do something, but it was always something that could really be achieved by a real person.
I like that, the realism. What was Matt like working with? Was he able to pick up on stuff pretty quick, or did it take him a little time? Yeah. No,
Matt was great. I mean, I've been really lucky. I mean, I'll finish off with Matt first, but I mean, Matt did every move in that fight. I used a double for one kick, and literally Matt at the time hadn't done much kicking, and I wanted one kick to look pretty nice, where he knocks Nicky, the hitman that had come in to kill him, over the desk, and Matt's leg wasn't quite in the right position that I wanted it to be to make it look like he was an expert with that kick. So I literally used one double for a leg kick. That was it. And everything else in the fight sequences, Matt did everything himself. 99.9% was Matt Damon for every fight.
That's pretty gangster. He must have been, yeah. That's a lot of work, man. And did he have any prior experience that you know of in martial arts?
No, nothing at all. I mean, he'd literally, as I said, he trained for 3 months in martial arts and with weapons, so that he was really familiar when he turned up on set. And at the end, when we came up with the idea of him firing the gun upside down, while he had the one in the right position and one upside down, and he was shooting with 2 guns, and one was normal, one was reversed. I mean, he adapted so quickly to that. He's like, oh yeah, I can do it, and let me just wreck it. And he was like just spot on. He put so much time in. I mean, this was a big movie for Matt. He'd just done a couple of movies that hadn't been quite as successful as he'd hoped. And I mean, as he said to me at the time, this is a really big one for me. This has got to be, it's got to really work for me. So he put so much time and effort in.
He knew he had to kind of like give it everything he had, basically, is what you're saying on this aspect, especially with the stunts and the acting and the character and development and all that. Yeah, it makes sense. So, man, I mean, you got so many credits.